What's up, everybody? It's FYGP, and today I want to talk about the killing of General Soleimani, a Quds Forces commander of the Iranian army. Now, his killing was totally against international law, and the US should not have done it. It was monumentally stupid on a geopolitical scale, since the killing of Soleimani and the commander of the Shia militias in Iraq were killed in the same airstrike by the US. It has united Iraq and Iran pretty much against the United States. And Iran is now asking US troops to leave their country. After how many years? I think since 2003, the US has been in Afghanistan non-stop. So it's about time that the US leaves the Middle East. It's about time that the US focuses on its own problems and doesn't try to be the world policeman. But Ben Shapiro, of course, he has something against that. And of course, he's gonna defend Trump's actions because they go. We all know that how much Ben Shapiro loves Israel and how much he wants the US and Israel to fuck over Iran all the time, and Syria as well, and Russia, of course. I mean, Ben Shapiro doesn't differ in his views on foreign policy much from any neocon in Washington, D.C., and that people follow this guy and actually buy this nonsense about, invading other countries for democracy and protecting the rights, and that Iran is so evil and Iran needs to be punished. It's just complete and utter bullshit. Nowhere is Shapiro going to mention that the killing was absolutely against international law, that Soleimani is not a terrorist, and that in fact he is a general of the Iranian army. And nowhere is he going to question the reports of the US media that allegedly Soleimani was plotting attacks against Americans. Now, of course, they always say, oh, he was plotting attacks against Americans, making it out to be that Soleimani was planning out attacks against American civilians, which couldn't be any further from the truth. Were there maybe plans to target US troops in Iraq? Sure, yeah, maybe there were. But it's not like the US hasn't targeted Iranian troops before and have bombed them, in fact, in many cases, such as bombing them in Syria as well, is what the US did. But let's listen to Ben Shapiro and his arguments on why killing General Soleimani was so great.
Trump was actually convinced to do this over a period of months, according to New York Times reporting, by members of his cabinet, including Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. This was not ill thought out. It is not.
It was ill thought out because, of course, I mean, what did it do? In the end, it just unified Iraq and Iran against the US. Because, of course, in the killing, they also killed the leader of a militia in Iraq, a Shia militia. And it has, in fact, only made American troops less safe in the area because now, of course, Iran is eyeing for retaliation and they want to retaliate. But Iran has been surprisingly calm, and which is good because the move of the U.S. behind this killing of Soleimani was to absolutely isolate Iran from its allies, Russia and China. And if Iran would have made aggressive action against the US, then, or shut down the Strait of Hormuz, or other things, then Russia and China would not stand by Iran. But since Iran has been so calm, and they have made the case that this was, a terrorist act, a state terrorist act, the killing of a foreign general in a third country in Iraq, which is, hundreds and hundreds of miles away from any US city. I mean, what is the US even doing there in the first place? I mean, gotta protect the oil, man. Just gotta protect the oil. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, it has been exposed that the U.S. foreign policy has been exposed on so many levels, but Ben Shapiro is still here defending it.
Not as though the Trump administration just did this on a moment's notice. In fact, how could you even come up with such a killing on a moment's notice? The answer is you don't. They must have been tracking Soleimani for quite a long time. And yet every media story begins with Trump killing Soleimani. Why? Because this is supposed to lead to the narrative that it's Trump who's the true aggressor. And that is the Democrat media narrative.
Of course he's the aggressor. I mean, look at what he's doing, right? Trump is the aggressor. I mean, the U.S. is the aggressor. Trump obviously is a puppet president, just like all of the presidents the U.S. had in all of its history. So, of course, I mean, the U.S. is the aggressor.
Today, that the Trump administration is doing unprecedented, terrible things. What is the latest unprecedented, terrible thing?
It is pretty terrible. I mean, if anything, Trump should be impeached for the illegal killing of a foreign general in a third country, something you just don't do under international law. In fact, you need to declare war on Iran in order to do such acts. But of course, I mean, the U.S. hasn't declared war in probably 100 years on any country, so it's not like they ever intended to follow international law or anything.
Well, apparently the Trump administration is now blocking Iran's top diplomat from addressing the UN Security Council. That would be Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif. Zarif came out just a few days ago and suggested that President Trump ought to be assassinated, that he ought to die. Okay, the Iranian government placed an $80 million bounty on Trump's head.
I didn't see that.
So Trump saying, yeah, you're not coming here, and you're not coming to U.S. soil, and you're not going to this organization that we pay for called the UN, and you're just going to jabber there about how terrible we are? You can stick it. You can stick it, buddy. And good for Trump. Now, Zarif is like, wow.
Of course, he's so happy. I mean,
that's a violation.
Because everything that's happening goes in favor of Israel. So, of course, Ben Shapiro is so happy about that. I mean, he could be happier.
Of international law. It's fun to watch the Iranians suddenly realize that international law violations are a bad thing. After literally decades of violating international law. After the worst sorts of human rights violations ranging from terror attacks in Lebanon to attacks on Israel to
attacks on Israel, there you go. I mean, you know, Iran obviously has a lot of human rights violations, but let's not act like Israel is so innocent here. I mean, what they're doing to the Palestinians is probably one of the worst things that is happening right now on the globe.
Attacks in Syria to backing the Assad regime, which is
backing the Assad regime, right?
And people to attack,
killing the Syrian, backing the Assad regime, which is killing the Syrian people. You've got to be fucking kidding me. I mean, Assad is fighting a U.S., Israeli, Saudi-backed insurgency in his country. He's not killing his own people.
Attacks in Yemen to attacks in Iraq. Suddenly the Iranians crying foul when it comes to, oh, you won't let our ambassador visit New York? The ambassador who recently was talking up the possibility of murdering your president? Wow, violations of international law aplenty here. According to foreignpolicy.com, the Trump administration is barring Iran's top diplomat from entering the United States this week to address the UN Security Council about the U.S. assassination of Iran's top military official in Baghdad, violating the terms of a 1947 headquarters agreement requiring Washington to permit foreign officials into the country to conduct UN business, according to 3 diplomats.
I mean, you know, doesn't that just really remind me of the merchant meme? I mean, it's really reminiscent. I mean, and this is not anti-Semitic what I'm about, but people will say it is, right? Oh man, look at those. I mean, he just reminds me of the merchant meme. You obviously do know what I'm talking about.
Diplomatic sources. Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif requested a visa a few weeks ago to enter the United States to attend a January 9th Security Council meeting on the importance of...
He's just rubbing his hands. Oh, good, good. Everything is great for Israel. Make Israel great again, Ben Shapiro, right?
Upholding of the UN Charter. So the meeting was about the importance of...
Or make greater Israel should be his motto.
...the UN Charter. Meanwhile, he was mourning and planning, apparently, for the attacks on the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad. This is someone who cares deeply about international law. Probably we should take them super seriously.
Still, it doesn't give you the right to assassinate him, even though maybe, I mean, I don't know, they alleged that he was planning attacks on the U.S. Embassy. I don't know. still doesn't give you the right to assassinate him.
The Thursday meeting was to provide Tehran's top diplomat with his first opportunity to directly address the world community since U.S. President Donald Trump ordered the January 3rd drone strike that killed Major General Qasem Soleimani, a top Iraqi militia leader, among others. I'm enjoying...
And a top Iraqi militia leader, amongst other people, probably.
...the way that the press, again, characterized Soleimani, who was a terrorist.
He was not a terrorist. He was a military leader of a foreign country, not a terrorist, not a non-state organization that is, you know, relies on, you know, on taking hostages or anything. I mean, Iran has done that in the past, but not in recent years. Haven't done anything like that. They haven't resorted to any terrorist acts. So you cannot really call Soleimani a terrorist. That's just complete and utter bullshit. If you call Soleimani a terrorist, then probably General Mattis, who is sitting there and, you know, in his war room, is probably 10 million times more of a terrorist than Soleimani. I mean, then you should probably call every general in any army a terrorist if Soleimani is a terrorist.
A top Iraqi militia leader? He's an Iranian government official. How exactly would he be an Iraqi militia?
I mean, probably what I assume was written in the article is that they killed Soleimani and a Iraqi militia leader, which is factual. So now Ben Shapiro can't even read, and now he's blaming the media for calling him a militia leader. Well, he's not. I mean, he was the commander of the Quds forces. The other guy, who was a militia leader from Iraq, was killed in the airstrike. But I mean, that's your super intellectual, right? Ben Shapiro on the alt-right, the so-called. I mean, it's not really the alt. It's the alt-light, right? They tell you maybe some truths about, I don't know, multiculturalism, propaganda and stuff, and about other things, about certain agendas. They maybe tell you some truth, but then they just, you know, put you back to sleep with the same old neocon rhetoric that you could hear about Iran for decades to come. And this is your intellectual for the alt-light. It's ridiculous. He's really nothing more than a media puppet. It's just not any better than any person that appears on CNN or Fox News or MSNBC.
Militia leader. Only if he was a terrorist who is backing non-governmental violent groups, which is the definition of a terrorist in this context.
Well, the U.S. backs all kinds of non-governmental, you know, rogue, I don't know, terrorist groups around the globe. They're the #1 sponsor of terrorism. The U.S. is. I mean, you can look all of this stuff up. Their creation of ISIS in Syria was, I mean, it can be traced back to them, basically. They gave them weapons. I mean, they gave Contras in Nicaragua, right-wing death squads in Nicaragua. They gave them all of the weapons they wanted back in the 1970s and 80s when the Iran-Contra scandal was going on. I mean, if you wanted, you know, cold people who rely on proxies to fight someone, terrorists, then probably the U.S. should be #1 on that list.
It's just wild. Yeah, but the way that the media characterize this stuff, how could Trump do this? It's just, how could he block this terrible person, Javad Zarif, from visiting the UN? I mean, without Javad Zarif.
All right, another moral argument. How do you know that the Iranian foreign minister is a terrible person? I mean, do you know him personally, or is it just stuff you assume? Right? I mean, it's safe to assume that Benjamin Netanyahu is a very terrible person based on the things he has said about Palestinians, right? But, you know, Zarif, he hasn't, I mean, I'm not aware that he has stated any, you know, horrible things or anything like that. He's just a normal diplomat, kind of, not like, you know, for example, Benjamin Netanyahu, who, I mean, you could build possibly an argument for Benjamin Netanyahu being a terrible person. Possibly.
Propagating his propaganda. How would we know what propaganda he was going to use? How would we know? It's just so awful.
Oh my God, the propaganda, it's just so awful. Yeah, I'll come up with a second part for this. See you guys another time. It's FYGP tuning out.